Hi, everyone. This is April Forts, the State Supervisor of Mathematics at the Iowa Department of Education. And in our May webinar, we were talking about the shifts. And so with our standards, we've heard about the shifts being about focus, coherence, and rigor. And I can just say, until recently, I really had an underappreciation for how important these shifts actually are in our instruction. So I wanted to do this webinar to highlight some of the things that I feel make them really, really valuable. So first, let's start with what are they? And so on the Achieve the Core website, you can go and they have a page where they talk about the shifts. And usually, if you ask an educator, they can tell you that they're focus, coherence, and rigor. But I know when I was in the classroom and even as an instructional coach, I didn't always understand what focus strongly where the standards focus really meant. And so Achieve the Core has done a great job of kind of unwrapping that for us. And so focus is the standards call for a greater focus in mathematics. Rather than racing to cover topics in a mile-wide, inch-deep curriculum, the standards require us to significantly narrow and deepen the way time and energy is spent in the math classroom. We focus on the major work, which we'll talk about in a little while, of each grade so that students can gain a strong foundation, solid conceptual understanding, a high degree of procedural skill and fluency, and the ability to apply the math that they know to solve problems inside and outside of the math classroom. That's a whole lot of focus right there. Coherence, think across grades and link to major topics within grades. So when we talk about thinking about across grades, the standards are designed around the coherent progressions from grade to grade. Learning is carefully connected across grades so that students can build new understanding onto foundations built in previous years. Each standard is not a new event, but an extension of previous learning. Linking to major topics, instead of allowing additional or supporting topics to distract from the focus of the grade, these concepts serve the grade level focus. For example, instead of data displays as an end in themselves, they are an opportunity to do grade level word problems. Rigor. In major topics, pursue conceptual understanding, procedural skills and fluency, and application with equal intensity. Notice that there's not a hierarchy here and they are all with equal intensity. So for conceptual understanding, when we use that phrase, that means the standards call for conceptual understanding of key concepts such as place value and ratios. Students must be able to access concepts from a number of perspectives so that they are able to see math as more than a set of mnemonics or discrete procedures. Procedural skills and fluency. The standards call for speed and accuracy in calculation. Students are given opportunities to practice core functions such as single-digit multiplication so they have access to more complex concepts and procedures. Applications. The standards call for students to use math flexible for applications and problem-solving contexts. In content areas outside of math, particularly in science, students are given the opportunity to use math to make meaning of and access content. So we're going to talk more about each of these and look at some tools that can help to continue our learning on these. And so you'll see that the high-level summary of the major work or major topics in grade K through 8. K2 is addition and subtraction, concept, skills, and problem solving, place value. 3-5 is multiplication and division of whole numbers and fractions, concepts, skills, and problem solving. 6th grade, ratios and proportional relationships, early expressions and equations. 7th grade, ratios and proportional relationships, arithmetic of rational numbers. And 8th grade is linear algebra and linear functions. And so you'll notice this little asterisk whenever they use major topics up above. And what that means is for a list of the major, additional, and supporting clusters by grades, it sends us to the Achieve the Core under Focus, and we'll get there. So let's go back to, so now that we've talked about what these 3 things are and we understand that they mean much more than just right here, let's look at them individually. So here are some tools. So when we talk about focus, so the focus is by grade level. And so you can see here that this is a restatement of what we've already talked about, but that the green boxes are the major works, the blue boxes are supporting, and the yellow circles are additional work. And so students can engage in the major work of the grade. Emphasis are given at the cluster level. Refer to the standards for specific standards that fall within each cluster. So what you can do with this tool is you can go into here and pick any grade level. And I'm just going to open up 2nd grade. And we're going to go into here and you'll see that the majority of the time and the resources should be spent around the green boxes. That doesn't mean that we don't teach the blue boxes or the yellow circles. It just means that we are going to spend the majority of our resources here. Additionally, you'll see what the required fluencies for 2nd grade are. We need students to do single-digit sums and differences, sums from memory by the end of grade 2, and add and subtract within 100. And so it breaks it down and it says an important subset of the major works in K-8 is the progression that leads towards middle school algebra. And why the focus is on algebra is because we want students to be college and career ready. When students go to college, it's not like they're going to have to take a remedial geometry class. They're going to have to take a remedial algebra class. We don't want them to have to do that. We want them to be able to go to college or to their career and have the math skills that allow them to take the appropriate course at college or to pursue the career that they are passionate about. Coherence, a tool to help us understand coherence, is this coherence map. And they continue to add, this is a living, breathing thing. And you'll notice when you go into here that it has the different grades. And right now, because of how big I have my screen, we can't see the top. So I'm going to shrink that a little bit. Okay, so, and the high school are in here. And how you're going to get to that is through the 8th grade, because the high school is structured differently. It's not set up by grade bands. So there's not a real great way to put it into here. So for example, what I mean by that is I'm going to go into 8th grade, expressions and equations, and I'm going to say I want to look at this major cluster, and I can go into the map and it says explore the map. And it says you can click on the magnifying glass to minimize the expanded standard card and explore the map. Next, it says an arrow going from A to B indicates related standards in cases where a student who cannot meet A is not likely to meet B. No, the arrow does not necessarily mean that A must be mastered before B or that learning B is an immediate step, next step after learning A. But if I don't know A, I'm going to struggle to know B. And that can be within the grade or outside of the grade or across grades. Notice that it's not linear and I don't have to learn B right after A, or that it means that A has to be mastered before I can learn B. But the likelihood of me learning B without understanding A is not so good. The dashed line indicates related standards. So as you can see here, you can see how the map is connected. And I'm going to click the magnifying glass to zoom out. And so here's an example where if I don't understand 6EEA1, it's going to be hard for me to understand 8EEA1. And then in high school, it's going to be difficult over here. So we can look at these, and so say a student in 8th grade is having trouble understanding this standard. Well, maybe I can go back and check to see, well, do they understand this standard over here? And so using this, I can then, it gives me a place to start with the student. So maybe I need to go back to 4th grade. Maybe they didn't get this over here. Additionally, what you find in here is there's task. You can download the example task. There's progressions. There's the focus, it links back. So let's just go back and let's pick this one over here. So again, there's task, there's progressions. This one has some assessment questions. So there's lots of tools in here that you can use. So this is a mini assessment. So I can use these mini assessments to see, well, does the student know this one? Perhaps they do. So lots of ways that I can use this coherence map to really help my students and inform my instructional decisions. And then I can link it and see how it's all connected. The wiring diagram. The wiring diagram came before the coherence map. And this is all the standards and all the different ways that they can connect. And you'll see that there's not linear paths here. So this is really interesting to just see how it all came together. And so you can see if you scroll in here, let me make that a little bit bigger, that we start over here with kindergarten, and then we go horizontally. It's 2nd grade, 3rd grade, 4th grade, 5th, and so lots of different paths over here. And then I can scroll down, and then this over here, it's turned sideways, but you can see more connections. So this would be really hard for educators to use, so this is why they made the coherence map, and we're thankful that they did. Rigor. In Rigor, you can go into here, and we talked about the 3 different aspects of rigor, and we said all with equal intensity. So conceptual understanding, procedural skills, and fluency and application. So this little video really shows that, and they have a shareable PDF here. Also, rigor doesn't mean harder. And so there's a webinar in here where you can go in and watch the video of the webinar, the presentation, and there's additional resources. So the balance of rigor and the standards. And so it gives some examples of the balance of the rigor here across the grades, across 6th grade. The presentation. And all of these materials can be used for professional development, for your own learning, lots of resources here. And then there's a whole hour-long webinar that you can watch and learn about the rigor. But a common misconception around rigor is that we think rigor means harder, and that's not what we're talking about when we're talking about rigor in the classroom and in the standards. So if you want to learn more, Achieve the Core has made some great professional development modules, and I would start with an introduction to the shifts and how you can use these if you're in charge of professional development in your district, or even if you want to learn on your own. But there's a user's guide. And what I like about this user's guide is when you go through, it gives you, if you have an hour, do this. If you have 2 hours to do this. If you have 4 hours to do this. So it gives you suggested module delivery. So they help you with everything that you would need, and we don't have to set and make it, right? Then after those 4 hours, there's a deep dive that gives you another 3 hours with an extension activity. So just a ton of resources here that I would encourage you to deep dive into and really learn about the shifts in how they can impact your instruction. Because if you haven't done work around the shifts and you have your curriculum or your instruction and you do the work around the shifts, there's probably a good chance some things are going to change around your curriculum. Maybe you weren't spending the time that you needed to, or on the major works, or maybe it wasn't as coherent as you needed it to be, and or you can use that coherence map to go back. But there should be, after learning, because right now you're learning just that it exists, it's really valuable and it will help you to implement the standards. And then after you take a deeper dive, but then we can't just stop there. We have to then do something with it, right? Otherwise, nothing's going to change for student outcomes. And we can't keep saying, oh, we're implementing the standards if we haven't implemented the shifts. Some additional resources, I just included some assessments, some sample items, and practice tests because I often get asked for those. And as a reminder, we have our G+ communities for our coaches and ICTM Save the Dates coming up October 9th. Hope to see you all there. And then our summer professional development. So as always, please let me know if you have any questions and please learn around the shifts. Thanks, everyone.